Hello and welcome to i4 Institute. My name is Khushbu Shah and I am working as software developer in i4 Technolab Private Limited. In previous session, I discussed about .NET Basic. In this session, I am going to talk about basics of OOPS. In this session, I am going to cover up following points: definition, fundamentals, class, objects, encapsulation, inheritance, procedure versus object-oriented programming. So let's start with OOPS. What is OOPS? The OOPS stands for Object-Oriented Programming Language. As the name suggests, a programming language which is based on objects rather than logic as seen in procedural languages. OOPS has four main standards which must be present every loop-based programming language. Programming language model organized around objects rather than actions and data rather than logic. Historically, a program has been viewed as a logical procedure that takes input data, processes it, and produces output data. For a programming language to be true, OOP language, the language must meet the following criteria. So what are these criteria? There are four criteria, that is abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance. Now let's see them all in definition. Classes and objects. The term class and object are sometimes used interchangeably, but in fact, classes describe the type of objects, while objects are usable instances of classes. So the act of creating an object is called instantiation. Using the blueprint analogy, a class is a blueprint and an object is building made from that blueprint. Abstraction. Abstraction manages the complexity of a business problem by allowing you to identify a set of objects involved with that business problem. So it is not necessary to allow each and every object in abstraction, but only the set of objects. Encapsulation. Encapsulation hides the internal implementation of an abstraction within the particular object. It is nothing but to hide the data from a user which is not relevant to show them. Polymorphism. It provides for multiple implementation of the same method. For example, different objects can have a same method, each of which perform different processing. Another example is plus sign. You can use plus sign for addition of two numbers as well as for concatenation of two strings. Inheritance. The excitement of Visual Basic .NET lies in inheritance. Visual Basic 5 introduced the concept of interface inheritance, which allows you to use the interface of a class but not its implementation. Now let's see them all in detail. So first we have a class. So what is class? It can be defined as a template or a blueprint that describes the behavior or states that object of its type support. Example of a simple class with member properties and member methods. Here you can see there is a public class circle having underscore radius as a member property which have a type decimal and access modifier is private. So this underscore radius can't be used outside another class, but another member property radius having a type double and it is a public, so it can be accessed outside the class circle. There is another member method which is area. Here you can see it returns double and it is a public, so it can be accessed by everyone. Now let me show you an example for a class. Here you can see I already created an example for you. Here you can see there is a public class test. It has four member properties, that is integer A, integer B, integer C and integer D. All are public, so it can be accessed outside the class as well. Inside that you can see I have created a default constructor test having a equal to 20, b equal to 10, and c is nothing but a plus b. Similarly, you can see I have another constructor having a two parameters, that is integer x and integer y. What I have done is I assigned a value to a and b and addition of x plus y, that you can also do a plus b, which will return the same. Now third one is with three parameters. So I assigned these three parameters to class test member properties. This dot a is nothing but class property a. This dot b is class property b, and this dot d is class property d. I assign this a, b, and d to class property c. Now again you can see I have here created a test constructor with object of a test, that is C2, and what I am doing is I am just assigning a, b, c value of this object. So to use the class in multiple forms, we can create object of classes. So what is object? It represents a particular instance of a class. There can be a more than one instance of an object. Each instance of an object can hold its own relevant data. Example of simple instantaneous of object of the class in example of a previous slide, which have a class circle, is like this. Here I created a simple object circle, obj circle equal to new circle. Here obj circle is an object of a class. Similarly, obj cir is another object of a class. Obj circle and obj ci are independent of each other. It will behave independently. Both the instantaneous, that is objects, hold the related data and members of a class. Now let me show you an example for an object. Here you can see I made an object C1 of a class test with a new test. It will nothing but it will call a default constructor which I made in a test. Here you can see test have a 0, default constructor have a 0 parameters, so it will call this constructor. Now what I have done is I am using this class and I am printing just value of a. So it will print value 20 for a and print value 10 for a b. What I have done is in C I just added two numbers, that is a plus b. So 20 plus 10 is 30 and nothing, this C will be accessed here. Similarly, I gave a two parameters 15 and 20, so it will call constructor having a two parameters, that is this. So it is same addition of a two numbers, so it will just print 15 here, 20 here, and 15 plus 20, that is 35. Now the third case, here you can see last one, I just gave a object of another same class test having C2 as an object. So what I have done is I just given this C2 to this constructor having a parameter object as a parameter object of a class. So what will happen here, C4.a will access C2.a, C4.b will access C2.b, and C4.c will access C2 of a C. Similarly, third case where I have just added three parameters 10, 10, 10. Here you can see that this constructor have a three parameter, so it will behave according to this constructor. Now let me run this application. Here you can see for first case a equal to 20 and b equal to 10, because the default constructor have a equal to 20 and b equal to 10, and summation is a and b is 30. Similarly, for second case a and b is 30. Second case a and b is 15 and 20 respectively. So it will give a summation of this two is 35. Now the third case is I just use the same object C2, so we'll have a same access equal to 15, b equal to 20 and sum equal to 35. For a third case, I passed a 10, 10, 10 as a parameter, so it will have a equal to 10, b equal to 10, c equal to 30, and answer is 30. This is just an example for a class and object and how to use class and object. Now let's move to encapsulation. So what is encapsulation? Encapsulation is a process of hiding irrelevant data from user. Let's see it in detail. Hiding irrelevant data from the user. A class may contain much information that is not useful for an outside class or interface. When this scenario happens, we use encapsulation. So how encapsulation can be used? By using access modifiers. So in our previous example circle, class have a private access modifier for member variable underscore radius. So this is not accessed outside the class. Inheritance is a process of using one class and its member into another class. Used in the small when a derived class is a base class. Enables code reuse. Main purpose is reusability of a code. Enables design reuse and polymorphic programming. Here we have an example for a graph of how inheritance is used. The class undergraduate will have access to all public members of student class as well as a person class. Similar for graduate. Graduate class have all access to all public members of a student class and person class. Now let me show you an example of an inheritance. Here you can see I have created two class, that is public class area and public class sub area. Colon area, it means sub area is inherited from area. In area there is a two method, that is cal. One have a two parameters length and breadth and another have a three parameters length, breadth and height. Both are returning just multiplications of parameters length into breadth and other one is length into breadth into height. When you see another class sub area which is inherited from area, overrides a calculate method length and breadth. Inside that I am just returning the same method which is called in its base class, that is area. So let me have a look for how object will react to these classes. Here you can see I created an instance of an area, that is A. So in integer C I am just returning what calculate method will return. So it has a two parameter 20, 10 and 20. So which method it will call? It will call area having a virtual integer cal method. Now there is another parameter, another instance sub area s is equal to new sub area and sub area s dot cal have a three parameter. So sub area is inherited from area, so it can access this method also because it is inheriting from area and this method is public. So it will call this method and return length into breadth into height. Similarly, there is a third case where s1 is equal to new sub area and s1 dot call have a two parameters. So in this area class, you can see inside a sub area, I just overrided a method cal having a two parameters. So it will call this parameter, this method. Now let me run this application. You can here see the difference between. The first is the area calculated from method cal in class area. Second, the area calculated from method cal in class sub area, which is inherited from area. And third is method calculated from cal in class sub area. This is just an overview of class and object and inheritance, how to use them. Now let's move to procedural programming and object-oriented programming. What are these? These are two different types of languages. It is a methodology to write the program where we specify the code in form of classes and objects. Object-oriented programming is the successor of procedural, that is structural programming. Procedural programming describes a program as a group of reusable code unit, that is procedures, which define input and output parameters. Procedural programs consist of procedures which invoke each other. The problem with procedural programming is that code reusability is hard and limited. Only procedures can be reused, and it is hard to make them generic and flexible. There is no easy way to work with abstract data structures with different implementations. This is how objects came to be. They describe characteristics, that is properties, and behavior, that is methods, of such real-life entities. So the main difference between these languages is object-oriented programming can be grouped into objects, and user can use this object in many different forms without defining class members again. And in procedural programming, every task you have to create different procedures, different functions. Thus, redundancy and limitation of classes and objects makes it more difficult for programmers to write the code. So for references, you can go through tutorialpoints.com, C# and csharper.com. Now let's end the session. Hopefully you enjoyed this session. Thank you for watching.